Red liquid splattered across the alien medical bay, causing all 6 of Krannix's eyes to widen in alarm as the human continued to push himself up from the examination table. The emergency alert siren blared through the room, automatically triggered by the vital signs monitor that was now flashing warning symbols. "Lieutenant Daniel Torres, you must remain still." Krannix's translator device converted his high-pitched clicking into English. "Your circulatory fluid is escaping at a dangerous rate." Daniel grimaced as he looked down at the gash on his thigh. The wound was deep, slicing through his standard issue pants and into the flesh beneath. Blood flowed steadily, but Daniel had seen worse during his 10 years in the Interstellar Defense Force. "Just a scratch," he muttered, reaching for his belt. With practiced movements, he unbuckled it and looped it around his upper thigh, pulling it tight above the wound. The bleeding immediately slowed. "See? Problem solved." The alien medic stared in disbelief, all 4 of his arms frozen in mid-air, medical instruments clutched in each specialized appendage. That is not proper medical procedure," Krannix protested, his blue skin flushing to a deeper shade with agitation. "Our scans indicate you have severed a significant blood vessel. You require immediate surgical intervention." Daniel swung his legs off the table, testing his weight gingerly on the injured limb. "Look, I appreciate the concern, but I've got a mission to finish. The extraction team is waiting." The joint human Grintax rescue operation had gone sideways when their shuttle crashed on the uninhabited moon. Half the team was still missing, and Daniel refused to sit in a medical bay while others were unaccounted for. Krannix moved to block the doorway, his slender frame surprisingly imposing as he stretched to his full 7-foot height. "As Chief Medical Officer of this vessel, I cannot allow you to leave. Your primitive tourniquet will not sustain you." Daniel's expression hardened. "With all due respect, Doc, you don't understand human physiology as well as you think. This will hold until I get back." The alien's 4 arms gestured frantically. "That is precisely my point. Your species is new to our alliance. We have limited data on human medical needs. The database indicates human blood loss exceeding 20% is fatal." Daniel took another step forward, wincing slightly but maintaining his balance. "Then I'll make sure I don't lose that much." The medical bay doors hissed open unexpectedly, revealing Captain Zex, the Grintax commanding officer of their joint mission. His reptilian features were set in what passed for concern among his species. "I heard the medical alert," Zex said, yellow eyes darting between the human and the medic. "Lieutenant Torres, are you fit for duty?" Before Krannix could object, Daniel straightened his posture. "Yes, sir. Ready to rejoin the search team." Krannix made a series of clicks that his translator couldn't keep up with, clearly too agitated for the device to process his language properly. When he regained his composure, he addressed the captain directly. "This human will lose consciousness within the hour if his wound is not properly treated. I have prepared the cellular regenerator, but he refuses treatment." Captain Zex studied Daniel thoughtfully, his scaled head tilting. "Lieutenant Torres, is this accurate?" "The doc's overreacting, sir," Daniel replied, though the throbbing pain in his leg suggested otherwise. "The belt will control the bleeding. My people have been using field tourniquets for centuries." "Centuries?" Krannix exclaimed. "That is precisely the problem. Your medical practices are archaic." Zex raised a clawed hand, silencing the medic. "We need every capable officer to locate the missing team members. The storm is intensifying, and we have a narrow window before communication becomes impossible." Krannix deflated visibly, all 6 eyes blinking in rapid succession. "Then at minimum, allow me to properly dress the wound and administer coagulant spray." Daniel glanced at his watch. The extraction window was closing fast, but bleeding out during the search wouldn't help anyone. 5 minutes, Doc. Not a second more." The alien medic moved with surprising speed, gathering supplies from various compartments in the medical bay. His 4 arms worked independently, cleaning the wound, applying a clear gel that immediately numbed the area, and wrapping a thin, metallic-looking bandage around Daniel's thigh. "This is a Grintax healing wrap," Krannix explained as he worked. "It will promote clotting and prevent infection. The effects are temporary without proper surgical intervention." Daniel nodded, impressed despite himself. The pain had subsided considerably, though he knew it was likely just the numbing agent. "How long will it hold?" he asked. 6 hours at maximum," Krannix replied, his tone clinical, but his eyes still conveying worry. "After that, the wound will reopen and the bleeding will accelerate due to the anticoagulant properties of the moon's atmosphere." Captain Zex, who had been monitoring the situation from the doorway, stepped forward. "The search should not take more than 4 hours. We have narrowed the crash site location to a 10-kilometer radius." "Then we have time," Daniel said, standing more confidently now. The dressing held firm, and with the pain temporarily blocked, he could move almost normally. Krannix handed Daniel a small, glowing blue vial. "Drink this. It will help replace your lost blood volume and provide energy." Daniel uncapped the vial and downed the contents in one gulp, suppressing a shudder at the metallic taste. "Thanks, Doc." "I will prepare a full surgical suite for your return," Krannix said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "And I am sending my medical assistant Trex with your team. He will monitor your condition." Daniel wanted to protest, but recognized the compromise when he heard it. Fair enough. As they left the medical bay, Captain Zex briefed Daniel on the search parameters. The crash site was located in a valley surrounded by sharp rock formations, making traditional aerial scans difficult. They would have to search on foot, navigating treacherous terrain while battling the moon's increasingly hostile weather. The rescue team consisted of 3 Grintax soldiers, Daniel and Trex, the medical assistant who looked like a younger, smaller version of Krannix with only 4 eyes instead of 6. They boarded a small transport shuttle that would take them as close to the search area as possible. "Lieutenant Torres," Trex said as they secured themselves for takeoff, "I must check your wound every 30 minutes. Dr. Krannix was very insistent." Daniel nodded. "Just don't slow us down." The shuttle ride was bumpy, the atmospheric disturbances growing stronger as they approached the crash site. Daniel could feel the vibrations resonating through his injured leg, sending occasional sharp pains despite the numbing agent. They landed a kilometer from the calculated crash coordinates, the shuttle unable to get closer due to the dangerous rock formations. As they disembarked, the full force of the moon's harsh environment hit them. The wind howled between the stone pillars, carrying fine particles that stung exposed skin. The sky above was a turbulent purple, flashes of lightning illuminating the landscape in brief, eerie bursts. "Communications will be limited," Captain Zex announced, raising his voice over the wind. "We stay together unless absolutely necessary." Daniel checked his equipment: standard-issue pulse rifle, emergency beacon, and personal shield generator. The latter would protect him from the worst of the elements, but had limited power. He activated it sparingly as they began their trek toward the crash site. The terrain was even worse than the scans had suggested. Jagged rocks jutted from the ground at unnatural angles, and the ground beneath their feet was uneven, with hidden crevices that could trap an unwary foot. Daniel found himself leaning more heavily on his good leg as they progressed, the pain in his injured thigh returning despite Krannix's treatment. An hour into their search, Trex approached Daniel during a brief rest period. "I need to check your wound," the alien medic said, medical scanner already in hand. Daniel reluctantly allowed the inspection, sitting on a flat rock as Trex carefully removed the outer layer of the bandage. The metallic wrap beneath was tinged red. "The bleeding has not stopped entirely," Trex observed, concern evident in his voice. "Your movements are causing the wound to reopen repeatedly." "Can you fix it?" Daniel asked, aware of Captain Zex watching them from a few meters away. Trex applied another layer of the clear gel and replaced the outer bandage. "Temporarily, but you should not continue much further." Before Daniel could respond, one of the Grintax soldiers called out from ahead, "Captain, I found something." They all converged on the soldier's position. In a small depression between 2 towering rock formations, lay a piece of wreckage clearly from their missing shuttle. The metal was twisted and scorched, but the Grintax insignia was still visible. "We're close," Captain Zex said, examining the debris. "Spread out but maintain visual contact." They continued their search with renewed purpose, following the trail of debris that had been scattered by the crash. Daniel pushed through the pain in his leg, determined not to slow the team down. The belt remained tight around his thigh, supplementing the alien medical technology that was clearly struggling to contain his injury. As they rounded a particularly large rock formation, the crash site came into full view. The shuttle had impacted in a narrow ravine, its hull split open like a cracked egg. There was no immediate sign of survivors. "Life signs scanner," Captain Zex commanded, and one of his soldiers immediately activated a handheld device. "3 faint signatures," the soldier reported after a moment. 2 Grintax, 1 human, inside the main cabin section. Daniel felt a surge of hope. 3 survivors out of the 5 missing team members wasn't ideal, but it was better than they'd dared hope given the condition of the wreckage. They carefully made their way down into the ravine, loose rocks sliding beneath their feet. Daniel slipped once, jarring his injured leg and sending a wave of pain through his body that momentarily blackened his vision. Trex was at his side instantly. "Lieutenant, your wound has reopened completely," the medic warned after a quick scan. "The bandage is saturated. You cannot continue." Daniel gritted his teeth, blinking away the spots in his vision. "We're almost there. I'm not turning back now." Captain Zex approached, his expression grim. "Can he continue, medic?" Trex's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of distress Daniel had learned to recognize. "Not without significant risk. The human circulatory system is not designed to function with sustained blood loss." Daniel pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly before finding his balance. "With respect, Captain, those are my people in there too. I'm seeing this through." The captain studied Daniel for a long moment, then nodded once. "Very well, but you will remain with Trex at all times." They continued their descent, reaching the crashed shuttle within minutes. The entry hatch was jammed, forcing 2 of the Grintax soldiers to use their superior strength to pry it open. The interior of the craft was dark, emergency lighting having failed hours ago. "Hello," Daniel called into the darkness. "This is Lieutenant Torres. We're here to get you out." A weak voice responded from the rear of the cabin. "Torres, thank God." They found the survivors huddled in what remained of the crew quarters. Dr. Emily Chen, the human xenobiologist, had a nasty head wound but was conscious. The 2 Grintax soldiers, Vex and Nix, were in worse shape, their resilient physiology the only reason they had survived the crash. "The others?" Daniel asked, though he could guess the answer from Emily's expression. "Didn't make it," she confirmed quietly. "The impact. It was too sudden." Captain Zex ordered his team to prepare the survivors for transport, while Daniel helped Emily to her feet. As she leaned against him for support, he felt a warm wetness spreading down his leg. The wound had opened completely. "Torres, you're bleeding," Emily exclaimed, noticing the blood soaking through his pants. "It's nothing," Daniel replied automatically, though the lightheadedness that suddenly swept over him suggested otherwise. "We need to get moving before this storm gets any worse." Trex appeared at his side, scanner beeping urgently. "Lieutenant, your blood pressure is dropping to dangerous levels. You must stop and allow me to apply emergency treatment." Daniel wanted to argue, but the medical readout Trex thrust in front of him told a clear story. His makeshift tourniquet had loosened during the climb down, and the alien bandage was completely saturated with blood. "Quickly," he conceded, propping himself against a section of an intact wall. Trex worked rapidly, removing the soaked bandage and applying a new one, along with a hypospray of what the medic described as synthetic hemoglobin. The effect was almost immediate, pushing back the gray edges that had been creeping into Daniel's vision. "This is a temporary solution," Trex warned. "You have approximately 2 hours before your condition becomes critical." The extraction would be challenging. The survivors couldn't climb back up the ravine in their condition, which meant calling the shuttle for a more dangerous extraction directly from the crash site. Captain Zex made the call, and their pilot confirmed he would attempt the risky landing. While they waited, Daniel retightened his belt and checked on Emily, who was being treated by one of the Grintax soldiers for her head wound. "What happened?" he asked her. "Navigation systems failed," she explained wearily. "We lost all control during descent. The pilot did his best, but—" She trailed off, glancing toward the front of the shuttle where the cockpit had been crushed on impact. The storm was intensifying, howling winds battering the broken shuttle and sending tremors through the wreckage. Loose panels rattled ominously, and fine dust began filtering in through the cracks in the hull. "Shuttle pilot reports landing is impossible in current conditions," Captain Zex announced after receiving an update through his communicator. "We must move to higher ground where extraction will be possible." Daniel exchanged glances with Trex, both aware of what this meant. The climb out of the ravine would be even more demanding than the descent. "I can make it," Daniel stated, more to convince himself than others. They fashioned makeshift stretchers for the injured Grintax soldiers, while Emily insisted she could walk with assistance. Daniel refused help, determined to prove he could manage, despite Trex's continuous warnings about his deteriorating condition. The ascent was brutal. Every step sent waves of pain through Daniel's leg, and he could feel warm blood trickling down his thigh, despite the new bandage. Halfway up, his injured leg buckled beneath him, sending him to his knees on the rocky ground. "Lieutenant," Trex was immediately at his side, scanner out. Daniel waved him off, using his rifle as a makeshift crutch to push himself back up. "I'm fine. Keep moving." But he wasn't fine, and everyone knew it. His face had lost all color, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold wind. The belt around his thigh was as tight as he could make it, cutting into his flesh, but blood still seeped steadily from the wound. "Your human physiology is remarkable," Trex observed as he administered another dose of synthetic hemoglobin. "A Grintax with this level of blood loss would be unconscious." "We're stubborn," Daniel managed through gritted teeth. They reached the top of the ravine just as the storm reached its peak intensity. Visibility dropped to mere meters, and the wind threatened to knock them off their feet. Captain Zex led them to a sheltered area between two large rock formations, providing minimal protection from the elements. "The shuttle will attempt extraction in 15 minutes when the storm enters a predicted lull," he announced. "We must be ready to move quickly." Daniel sank gratefully to the ground, no longer able to pretend he could stand unassisted. Trex immediately began checking his wound, his expression grim even by alien standards. "You have exceeded all medical expectations," the medic admitted, "but you cannot continue much longer. Your belt tourniquet saved your life, but it is not enough." Daniel looked down at his blood-soaked pant leg. "Just need to hang on a little longer." Emily appeared beside him, her own face pale beneath the bandage on her forehead. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. "Speak for yourself," Daniel replied with a weak smile. She glanced at his leg, then at Trex. "How bad is it?" "Critical," Trex answered before Daniel could downplay it. "He requires immediate surgical intervention to repair the damaged blood vessel." The minutes crawled by as they waited for the shuttle. Daniel felt himself growing colder, despite the protection of the rocks, a sure sign of advancing blood loss. His vision blurred occasionally, forcing him to blink rapidly to clear it. "Stay awake, Lieutenant," Trex urged, noticing his drooping eyelids. "Talk to me about Earth. I have never visited your home world." Daniel forced himself to focus. "Not missing much. Too many people. Not enough space." "Yet your species seems extraordinarily adapted to survival," Trex observed. "This emergency medical technique with the belt, it is taught to all your warriors?" "Basic first aid," Daniel confirmed. "Tourniquets have been saving soldiers for centuries." The conversation was interrupted by Captain Zex. "The shuttle is approaching. Prepare to move." They heard the engines before they saw the craft, a low rumble cutting through the howling wind. Then the shuttle appeared through the swirling dust, hovering precariously as it attempted to find a flat enough surface to land. "Now!" Zex commanded as the shuttle touched down 20 meters away. The team moved as one, carrying the injured Grintax soldiers on stretchers. Daniel attempted to stand, but found his legs wouldn't support him any longer. Without a word, Trex and Emily positioned themselves on either side of him, practically carrying him toward the waiting shuttle. The wind buffeted them mercilessly, nearly knocking them over several times. Daniel's consciousness began to fade, the world turning gray around the edges. He was vaguely aware of being lifted into the shuttle, of the doors closing behind them, of Trex's urgent voice calling for emergency medical supplies. The last thing he remembered was the sensation of the shuttle lifting off and Trex saying something about remarkable human resilience. Daniel woke to the sterile white ceiling of the medical bay aboard the Grintax vessel. His mouth was dry and his body felt oddly weightless. He turned his head slightly and found Krannix standing nearby, monitoring a display of medical readouts. "He's conscious," the alien medic announced to someone out of Daniel's field of vision. Captain Zex stepped into view, looking as close to relieved as his reptilian features allowed. "Lieutenant Torres, welcome back." "The team?" Daniel asked, his voice raspy. "All survivors recovered and stable," Zex confirmed, "thanks in no small part to your persistence." Krannix moved closer, all 6 eyes focused on Daniel with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "You should have died," the medic stated matter-of-factly. "By all medical calculations, you lost 28% of your total blood volume. And yet, you remained conscious and mobile." Daniel attempted to sit up but was gently restrained by one of Krannix's 4 arms. "Your leg required extensive reconstruction," the medic explained. "The femoral artery was severed, along with significant muscle damage. You will need at least 2 weeks of recovery before returning to duty." "2 weeks?" Daniel protested. "I recommended 3, Krannix replied firmly. "Captain Zex overruled me." Daniel relaxed back onto the medical bed, suddenly aware of how exhausted he still felt. "The belt worked, though, right?" Krannix made a series of clicking sounds that the translator interpreted as the equivalent of a sigh. "Yes, Lieutenant. Your primitive tourniquet kept you alive long enough to reach proper medical care, though I would not recommend it as standard procedure. We've updated our medical database with information on human emergency field treatments," Captain Zex added. "Your belt technique will be included in training for all Grintax medical personnel serving alongside humans." Daniel couldn't help but smile at the thought of alien medics learning to use belts as tourniquets. Happy to contribute to interspecies medical knowledge. "Rest now," Krannix instructed, adjusting something on one of the medical devices attached to Daniel's arm. "Your body has much healing to do." As Daniel drifted back to sleep, he heard Captain Zex asking Krannix about human physiology, and the medic's response: "They are far more resilient than their fragile appearance suggests, and considerably more stubborn than is medically advisable." Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel's recovery progressed steadily under Krannix's meticulous care. The alien medic had become fascinated by human healing processes, documenting every stage of Daniel's recovery for the Grintax medical database. "Your cellular regeneration rate is remarkable," Krannix observed on the 10th day, examining the healing wound with a scanner, "though not as efficient as our own." "We make up for it in other ways," Daniel replied, carefully testing his weight on the injured leg. The pain had subsided to a dull ache, and he could walk short distances without assistance. Emily visited daily, her own head wound healing well. She brought news from the rest of the crew and updates on the mission status. The joint human Grintax operation had been deemed a success despite the crash, with valuable data collected on the moon's unusual atmospheric properties. "They're talking about sending another team in 3 months, she told him, "with better shuttles this time." "Count me in," Daniel said without hesitation. Emily raised an eyebrow. "After what happened, you nearly bled to death." "But I didn't," he pointed out, "and next time I'll pack extra belts." On the final day of his mandated recovery period, Daniel was summoned to Captain Zex's quarters. The Grintax commander was reviewing reports when Daniel arrived, but set them aside immediately. "Lieutenant Torres," Zex greeted him, "you appear to have made a full recovery." "Thanks to Dr. Krannix," Daniel acknowledged, though he's still not happy about clearing me for duty. Zex made a sound that Daniel had learned was the Grintax equivalent of a laugh. He has submitted a 15-page report on human emergency medical techniques to Grintax High Command. Your species has made quite an impression on our medical community. "Happy to help," Daniel said with a smile. "I asked you here for a specific purpose," Zex continued, his tone becoming more formal. "The Grintax Military Council has authorized a commendation for your actions during the rescue mission." He reached into a compartment in his desk and removed a small metal object, a six-sided badge with intricate engravings and a central blue stone. "This is the Mark of Endurance," Zex explained, holding it out to Daniel. "It is rarely awarded to non-Grintax. You will be only the third human to receive it." Daniel accepted the badge with surprise. "I'm honored, Captain, but I was just doing my job." "You demonstrated qualities highly valued in Grintax culture: perseverance in the face of personal injury and prioritizing mission success above individual concerns." Zex's yellow eyes studied Daniel thoughtfully. "Though Dr. Krannix still believes your actions were, and I quote, medically inadvisable to the point of insanity." Daniel laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "As you should," Zex agreed. "The alliance between our species is still young. Understanding each other's capabilities and limitations is essential to its success." As Daniel prepared to return to active duty the following day, Krannix insisted on one final examination. The alien medic's initial alarm at human medical practices had evolved into a grudging respect, though he still clicked disapprovingly when Daniel mentioned returning to the field. "Your wound has healed sufficiently for light duties," Krannix conceded after completing his scan. "But the regenerated tissue will remain vulnerable to re-injury for another month." "I'll be careful," Daniel promised. "Like you were careful during the rescue mission?" Krannix's translator somehow managed to convey sarcasm perfectly. Daniel grinned. "I got the job done, didn't I?" All six of Krannix's eyes blinked simultaneously, a gesture Daniel now recognized as exasperation. "You humans have a disturbing tendency to view near-death experiences as achievements rather than failures of proper preparation." "It's part of our charm," Daniel replied lightly. Before leaving the medical bay, Daniel paused in the doorway. "Thanks, Doc, for everything." Krannix's blue skin flushed slightly darker, a sign of emotional response. "I have added a section to your medical file. Patient demonstrates extraordinary resilience and deplorable judgment. Approach with caution." Daniel laughed. "I'll take that as a clean bill of health." As he walked through the corridors of the Grintax vessel, Daniel reflected on how his injury had, ironically, strengthened the bond between the human and Grintax crews. His simple act of using his belt as a tourniquet, something any human soldier would have done instinctively, had demonstrated to their alien allies that humans were both vulnerable and resilient in ways they hadn't anticipated. The Mark of Endurance badge weighed comfortably in his pocket, a tangible symbol of newfound respect. In the vast expanse of space, with its countless dangers and unknowns, understanding between species could mean the difference between life and death. Sometimes it took a near disaster to build that understanding. Daniel reached the observation deck where several off-duty crew members had gathered. Emily waved him over, pointing to the view screen where the purple-hued moon was growing smaller as the ship prepared to break orbit. "Ready for our next adventure?" she asked as he joined her. Daniel patted his belt with a smile. "Always prepared."